If you're over 60 and find yourself waking up 2 or 3 times, or even more, during the night just to go to the bathroom, you're not alone. Constantly waking up doesn't just make you lose sleep. It lowers your quality of life. You feel groggy the next morning, struggle to stay alert, or end up needing a nap during the day. For some people, this also leads to anxiety, a higher risk of losing balance when walking at night, and reduced physical recovery due to interrupted sleep. We often blame aging, and it's true, the body does change over time. As we get older, the kidneys filter more slowly at night, the bladder becomes more sensitive, and even a very small amount of urine can make you feel like you need to go immediately. That's normal physiology as we age, but it doesn't mean there's nothing you can do to improve the situation. Many people try solutions like drinking less water in the evening, cutting back on caffeine, or getting their prostate checked. And while those things matter, there's another factor that doesn't get as much attention but is well worth considering: the type of fruit you eat after dinner. Many fruits that seem harmless, even healthy, can actually irritate the bladder, increase acidity in your urine, or trigger your body to produce more urine during the night. The result? You wake up not because your bladder is full, but because it's overstimulated. The opposite is also true. There are certain fruits that can help calm the bladder, reduce false urges to urinate, and support deeper sleep without middle-of-the-night interruptions. In this video or article, I'm going to share with you 5 types of fruit you can eat in the evening to support better sleep and reduce nighttime bathroom trips, and 5 common fruits you should avoid eating after the afternoon if you want to protect your sleep. This isn't a list of forbidden foods, and it's not based on hearsay or unproven tips. What I'm sharing is grounded in the basic principles of how your urinary and digestive systems function as you age, something any urologist or nutritionist can confirm. And here's what matters most. You don't need to completely overhaul your diet or take medication. Just a few small adjustments, like the timing of when you eat fruit, or choosing fruit that's better suited to your body after age 60, can make a clear, noticeable difference. If you're sleeping 8 hours but still feel exhausted, if you're rushing to the bathroom right after dozing off, this is the place to start. Your dinner and the fruit you eat afterward. Fruits that help soothe the bladder and support sleep in older adults. After the age of 60, our bodies begin to function differently. The kidneys filter fluids more slowly at night. The bladder becomes more sensitive and easily irritated by factors that previously weren't an issue. Even a very small amount of urine can be enough to wake you up. What you eat, especially in the evening, directly affects how often you wake up to urinate and the quality of your sleep. Many people overlook the fact that fruit, which is generally considered healthy, can actually disrupt sleep if you choose the wrong types or eat them at the wrong time. But the opposite is also true. Certain fruits can help soothe the bladder, reduce urgency, and support deeper, more restful sleep. Below are the first 2 fruits older adults should consider eating later in the day, not because they cure anything, but because they align better with how the body functions after age 60. 1. Banana. Bananas are a safe and bladder-friendly option. This fruit has a neutral pH and doesn't increase the acidity of urine, a key factor that can irritate the bladder and cause older adults to wake up during the night. Additionally, bananas are high in potassium, about 400 mg per medium-sized fruit, a mineral that helps regulate smooth muscle function, including the bladder muscles. This means bananas may help stabilize the bladder, preventing premature contractions before it's truly full. Bananas also contain magnesium, which supports neurotransmission and helps calm overactive reflexes between the bladder and the brain. Older adults often have a more sensitive pelvic nervous system, making it harder to accurately control the urge to urinate. A food like bananas, which is easy to digest and doesn't have a diuretic effect, is perfectly suited for this stage of life. Bananas also contain tryptophan, an amino acid essential for producing serotonin and melatonin, two compounds directly involved in sleep. So eating a banana in the early evening can offer dual benefits, supporting the bladder and helping calm the nervous system before bedtime. How to use it properly. Eat one ripe, but not overripe or cold, banana about 1 hour after dinner or between 4-6 p.m. Older adults should avoid eating unripe bananas or those stored too long in the fridge, as they may cause indigestion. 2. Papaya. Papaya is often known for its digestive benefits, but few people realize the strong connection between the digestive and urinary systems, especially in older adults. When the intestines are bloated, digestion is slow or constipation occurs, overall abdominal pressure increases. Much of that pressure pushes down on the pelvic area, where the bladder is located. The result? You may feel the urge to urinate early, even when there isn't much urine in the bladder. Ripe papaya contains papain, an enzyme that breaks down protein and promotes gentle digestion, reducing bloating after meals. In addition, it's rich in soluble fiber, which supports healthy bowel movements and helps relieve constipation, a silent yet common cause of nighttime urination in seniors. Another benefit is that papaya has a mild alkalizing effect, which makes urine less acidic. This matters because urine with a low pH, high acidity, can cause a burning sensation and trigger the urge to urinate more frequently, especially at night. Papaya doesn't act as a diuretic and doesn't contain high amounts of simple sugars like some other fruits. That's why many older adults who switch from citrus fruits to papaya in the evening notice a clear difference. Deeper sleep, fewer wake-ups, and less false urgency to urinate. How to use it properly. Eat about 150 grams, around 5 oz of ripe papaya, orange flesh. Not too soft, not unripe, about 1 hour after dinner or later in the afternoon. Eat it at room temperature, and avoid pairing it with cold dishes or dairy products. 3 pears aid digestion, relieve pressure on the bladder, and ease constipation. In older adults, the sensation of needing to urinate at night doesn't always come directly from the bladder. Sometimes it's caused by external pressure on the bladder, specifically from the intestines. If the digestive system is sluggish, if constipation persists, or if there's bloating after dinner, the lower abdomen can become distended, putting physical pressure on the bladder. As a result, you may feel the urge to urinate, even if the bladder isn't actually full. Pears are a smart choice in this situation. They're naturally sweet, low in acid, easy to digest, and especially rich in sorbitol, a natural sugar alcohol that draws water into the intestines, softens stool, and supports bowel movement. Sorbitol is often used gently as a natural laxative in elderly diets. Additionally, pears contain plenty of soluble fiber, particularly in the peel, which helps relieve chronic constipation, a common but often overlooked cause of nighttime urinary issues in older adults. Eating one medium-sized pear in the late afternoon not only helps lighten the belly before bedtime, but also reduces the likelihood of waking up in the middle of the night due to lower abdominal pressure. Pears also have a low glycemic index, so they don't cause a rapid spike in blood sugar. That makes them a good option for seniors managing diabetes or prediabetes. How to use them properly. Eat one medium-sized pear between 3:00 p.m. and 5:00 p.m., not too close to bedtime. The peel contains a lot of fiber, so keep it on if possible. Wash thoroughly and chew well to aid digestion. Avoid eating pears that are too cold or not yet ripe. 4. Watermelon, mild anti-inflammatory effects, supports the prostate and bladder. Watermelon is a familiar fruit, especially in summer. But for older adults, the timing and amount consumed are especially important. In terms of benefits, watermelon is rich in lycopene, an antioxidant linked to reducing inflammation in the prostate and supporting urinary tract function overall. Several studies suggest that lycopene can help improve nighttime urination, difficulty urinating, or the sensation of incomplete emptying in older men, with mild to moderate prostate enlargement. Beyond that, lycopene also helps soothe the bladder lining, especially in cases of mild chronic inflammation or irritation from overly acidic urine. However, because watermelon contains over 90% water and has a cooling effect, eating it in the evening or too close to bedtime can increase nighttime urination and disrupt sleep. That's why watermelon should be seen as a beneficial fruit only when consumed correctly, during the daytime and in moderate portions. How to use it properly. Eat in the morning or early afternoon, ideally before 2 p.m. Appropriate portion, about 150-200 grams, around one small bowl. Eat plain without mixing with milk or chilling excessively. Avoid completely in the evening if you're dealing with nighttime urination. 5. Guava, high in vitamin C, mild anti-inflammatory, and gentle on the bladder. Guava is a common fruit but often underrated when it comes to urinary health. Guava contains a very high amount of vitamin C, nearly comparable to citrus fruits, but with one important difference. It contains less citric acid. That means it's less likely to raise urine acidity, a major cause of bladder lining irritation in older adults. In addition, guava contains polyphenols and flavonoids, compounds with mild anti-inflammatory properties that help calm the bladder and urinary tract, particularly for those experiencing mild burning sensations or frequent urination. Guava is also high in fiber, which helps regulate blood sugar and supports digestion without putting extra pressure on the bladder. Because of this, guava is suitable for older adults managing diabetes or metabolic syndrome. One important note: guava should be eaten during the day or in the mid-afternoon when digestion is still active. Avoid guavas that are overripe, too hard, or eaten with salt or chili powder. These additives can irritate both the digestive and urinary systems. How to use it properly. Eat one ripe, but not overly soft or hard, guava around 3:00 p.m. at least 2 hours before dinner. You can peel it if you have a sensitive digestive system. Eat it plain. Do not dip it in salt, spices, or pair it with dairy-based foods. As you age past 60, your body needs a different kind of care. Bladder health and sleep quality are no longer just about how much water you drink or what medications you take. They're closely tied to how and what you eat, especially the fruit you choose at the end of the day. The 5 fruits below don't cure disease, but when used correctly, they gently and smartly support the body. Bananas calm the bladder, stabilize nerve signals in the pelvic region. Papaya relieves bloating, supports digestion, an indirect cause of nighttime urination. Pears relieve constipation, reduce lower abdominal pressure, regulate digestion. Watermelon supports the prostate, mildly anti-inflammatory, best consumed during the day. Guava, rich in vitamin C, low in acid, helps soothe the bladder lining. If you're looking to sleep through the night without interruptions, start with these small, simple changes. No pills, no harsh diets. Because sometimes, the difference isn't in a bedtime prescription. It's in the bowl of fruit you choose in the afternoon. 5 types of fruit to avoid at night if you frequently wake up to pee. From the age of 60 onward, what you eat after dinner doesn't just affect your digestion. It directly impacts how your kidneys and bladder function during sleep. While some fruits can help soothe the bladder, others, even those that seem harmless, can irritate it or increase urine production at night, making you get up multiple times to use the bathroom. Here are 5 types of fruit you should avoid eating after the afternoon, especially if you're experiencing disrupted sleep due to nighttime urination. 1. Oranges and other citrus fruits, including mozambique, sweet lime. Oranges, lemons, tangerines, grapefruits, and sweet limes are popular fruits known for their high vitamin C content and pleasant tangy flavor. However, they also contain high levels of citric acid, which can lower the pH of your urine, meaning it becomes more acidic. The problem is, when highly acidic urine passes through an aging, sensitive bladder, it can cause a burning sensation, discomfort, or an urgent need to urinate, even if the bladder isn't full. This triggers a reflex loop between the bladder and the brain, causing you to wake up in the middle of the night to pee. In fact, many older adults have the habit of drinking orange juice in the evening, thinking the vitamin C will help boost their immune system during sleep. But what most people don't realize is that high doses of vitamin C at night can mildly stimulate the nervous system and slightly increase metabolism, both of which can disrupt sleep. An elderly man from Hyderabad once shared that he used to drink orange juice every day at 8 p.m. As a result, he would wake up 3 to 4 times a night with an urgent need to urinate. After switching his orange juice intake to lunchtime, the problem significantly improved within just a few days. Smart handling. You don't need to eliminate oranges, lemons, or sweet limes from your diet entirely. Just shift your consumption to before 2 p.m. when your digestive system works best and your body has enough time to process the acids before bedtime. Avoid drinking citrus juice close to bedtime or after dinner. 2. Pineapple's strong enzymes that aid digestion but irritate the lower abdomen. Pineapple is a juicy fruit with a light sweetness, often used in desserts or salads. It contains bromelain, a powerful enzyme that breaks down protein and supports digestion. But this same enzyme is what makes pineapple a fruit to avoid at night, especially for older adults. Why? Bromelain stimulates bowel activity, and when your intestines are active while you're lying down after you've gone to bed, it puts mechanical pressure on the pelvic region, where the bladder sits in front. In older people, even a small amount of pressure can trigger a false urge to pee, causing you to wake up in the night with an urgent need to urinate, even if your bladder is only half full. Moreover, pineapple has a mild natural diuretic effect, which can slightly increase urine production if you eat a large amount. A woman in China recalled that she used to eat a few slices of pineapple after dinner to relieve constipation. While it clearly helped her digestion, she noticed that she'd wake up at 2-3 a.m. with a tight, full feeling in her bladder. After cutting out pineapple in the evening, this symptom almost completely disappeared. Smart handling. Only eat pineapple in the morning or early afternoon, no later than 3 p.m. Eat pineapple when your stomach is already digesting well. Avoid it on an empty stomach or after a heavy dinner. If you're dealing with nighttime urination, it's best to avoid pineapple in the evening altogether, even just a few slices. 3 grapes sweet, easily fermented, cause bloating and pressure on the bladder. Grapes, especially black and red varieties, are a popular fruit among many elderly households thanks to their natural sweetness, soft texture, and ease of eating. But it's that very sweetness and high natural sugar content, fructose, that becomes an issue when consumed in the evening. The sugars in grapes can easily undergo mild fermentation in the large intestine, especially when eaten after a dinner rich in starch or protein. This fermentation process produces gas, causing the lower abdomen, an area near the bladder, to bloat. While not painful, this creates mechanical pressure on the bladder, making you feel the urge to urinate even when your bladder isn't actually full. Moreover, grape skins are harder to digest than the pulp, particularly for older adults whose digestive systems have slowed down. For people with sluggish bowel movements or frequent bloating, grape skins can increase gas production and cause discomfort late at night. A retired teacher from Lucknow once shared, "I loved eating chilled grapes in the evening as a dessert, but afterward I had to get up at least twice every night to use the bathroom, even when I didn't really need to." After switching this habit to lunchtime, his sleep improved noticeably. Smart solutions. Eat grapes in the morning or early afternoon, no later than 2-3 p.m. If your digestion is weak, peel the grapes and avoid eating them cold straight from the fridge. Don't combine grapes with milk, yogurt, or fermented foods like curd to avoid further fermentation in the gut. 4. Mixed fruit juices. high acidity, quick impact on the bladder. Many older adults have the habit of drinking a glass of refreshing fruit juice in the evening, sometimes orange juice, or a mix of orange, lemon, kiwi, and so on. It sounds healthy, but in reality, this is a concentrated blend of acids and sugars. Compared to eating fresh fruit, juices accelerate the absorption of acids and fructose into the bloodstream. The result? Your kidneys have to work faster to filter out the sugar and water. More urine is produced. The sugar and acids can make urine more concentrated and acidic, irritating the bladder. When highly acidic urine passes through the bladder, it can cause a mild burning sensation or sudden urges to urinate, especially in those with pre-existing bladder issues like mild inflammation, overactive bladder, OAB, or prostate enlargement in men. Smart solutions. If you want juice, drink it in the morning or early afternoon. Never after 3 p.m. Avoid mixing too many highly acidic fruits together. Instead, after dinner, drink warm water or have a small portion of soft, low-juice fruits like pear or papaya. 5. Raw tomatoes, not a dessert fruit, easily irritate the bladder. Although used like vegetables in cooking, tomatoes are technically a fruit and are often eaten raw in salads or sandwiches. But for older adults, eating raw tomatoes, especially at night, can be a small mistake that leads to a restless night. Tomatoes contain oxalic acid and citric acid, both of which can mildly irritate the bladder lining, especially if the bladder is aging and sensitive. Some studies even suggest that tomatoes may increase the risk of forming tiny crystals in the urine, causing discomfort during urination. The habit of eating raw tomato salads after dinner, or in a nighttime sandwich, can unintentionally increase nighttime bathroom trips or cause minor urgency while sleeping. An elderly couple in Ahmedabad once shared that they loved having tomato and onion salad in the evening. But after switching to steamed vegetables like carrots and green beans, they slept more soundly and stopped waking up from the urge to pee. Smart solutions. Use thoroughly cooked tomatoes in soups, stews, or stir-fried dishes. Avoid raw tomatoes after 6 p.m. if you have overactive bladder syndrome or frequent nighttime urination. It's best to avoid raw tomatoes entirely. Though they may seem like healthy choices, fruits like oranges, pineapples, grapes, mixed fruit juices, and raw tomatoes can all affect your bladder and sleep if eaten at the wrong time. Keep in mind, natural acids and sugars in fruit can irritate the bladder. Mild fermentation in the gut can create pressure that triggers a false urge to pee. Most importantly, the aging body needs stability and a regular rhythm, not a sudden, refreshing treat after 7 p.m. Keep fruit in your diet, but choose the right kinds, eat them at the right time, and pay attention to how your body responds after each meal. Because a good night's sleep doesn't come from a sleeping pill. It might just begin with skipping that glass of orange juice after dinner. When we're young, we can eat anything, anytime, and still sleep like a rock. But after 60, our bodies don't work the same way. Digestion slows down. The kidneys filter more slowly, and the bladder reacts more quickly. That's not a bad thing. It's natural, but it means we need a way of living that fits who we are now. In this video, you saw clearly, there are certain fruits that can help calm the bladder and support more uninterrupted sleep, like bananas, papayas, pears, watermelon, and guava. And there are others that, if eaten at the wrong time, can silently disrupt your sleep, like oranges, pineapples, grapes, mixed fruit juices, and raw tomatoes. The message here is be afraid of fruit. It's choose the right ones, eat them at the right time, and listen to your body. You don't need to overhaul your entire diet. Just start with one small thing, like skipping that glass of orange juice after dinner, or adding a banana at 5 p.m. Then pay attention to what happens next. Maybe you'll get deeper sleep, fewer wake-ups during the night, a lighter, easier morning. Because sometimes to sleep better, you don't need a pill. You just need to know when to eat and when to stop. If you found this helpful, save it, try it for 3 days, and see how your body responds. And if you have friends or loved ones who struggle with nighttime urination or chronic insomnia, send them this post or video. A well-timed reminder can be more valuable than any prescription. Thanks for taking the time to listen. Wishing you deep sleep, a peaceful morning, and a body that always knows exactly what's best for you.